students, welcome to MOOC on Human Rights in India. Over a course of this module and the coming module, we will look at the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. In particular, we will see what is the constitutional and legislative framework for the protection of child rights, what is the composition of the NCPCR and what are its functions. In particular, we will see what are its functions in relation to other specific legislations like Right to Education Act or POCSO, that is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. Children, by virtue of their strength, by virtue of their level of maturity, are vulnerable for various forms of exploitation and they need special care and protection. Keeping this in view, the Constitution of India has a number of provisions for the protection of children. Through a constitutional amendment, Article 21 dealing with right to life and personal liberty was amended to Article 21A was inserted, which requires the state to provide free and compulsory education to all children in the age group of 6 to 14 years. In addition to the Article 21A, Article 23 of the Constitution prohibits trafficking in human beings and also forced labor. And Article 24 of the Constitution prohibits employment of children in factories, mines, and any other hazardous occupations. These three articles, 21A, 23 and 24, are in the part 3 of the Constitution dealing with the fundamental rights. And if you take up part 4 of the Constitution dealing with the directive principles of state policy, Article 39F in particular provides that children should be given opportunities and other conditions to enable them to develop in a healthy manner in conditions of freedom and dignity. So these constitutional provisions have been supplemented by a number of specific legislations. For instance, there is this Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2006, and there is a Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986, which was amended in 2016, and there is this Immoral Traffic Act. There is a Preconception Prenatal Diagnostics Act, which seeks to prohibit female feticide, and there are a number of other legislations which deal with protection of the rights of children. You take for instance right of children for free and compulsory education act, which is called RTE Act in short. And as I said earlier on, there was a Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, and then there is this Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act, and there are other legislations as well. If you look at the Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, there are provisions which are child friendly and which seek to protect the rights of children. These constitutional provisions, legislations have been further supplemented by regulations. For instance, there were adoption regulations, there was a national plan of action which was, in the early 2000, it was enacted. It was further replaced with more improved version of the National Plan of Action. There was a National Charter, National Children's Policy. In fact, the National Plan of Action had a range of goals and strategies, and in order to achieve those goals and strategies, it talked about the setting up of a National Commission for Protection of Child Rights and state commissions in various states for the protection of child rights, and that these bodies be given sufficient autonomy so that they can uphold child rights. We have seen the domestic provisions in the form of constitutional safeguards, legislative safeguards, and also policies and other regulations. If you turn your attention to the international standards, the UN General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child in the year 1989, which came into force in 1991, and India in fact adopted it in the year 1992, and India also signed and ratified 2 optional protocols to the Convention on the Rights of the Children. If you look at the Convention on the Rights of the Child, there are a number of principles, particularly which seek to uphold the children's right to life, survival and protection, non-discrimination, best interests of the children, and participation. And these principles are also incorporated in our domestic policies and plans of action by India. The Commission for Protection of Child Rights Act was adopted by the Parliament in the year 2005, and under the CCPR Act, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights was established in the year 2007. The non-governmental organizations and civil society hold that NCPCR, by its very character, is like a national human rights institution, and they therefore argue that it should conform to Paris principles, which as you have seen in the earlier modules, talk about a wide mandate for the Commission, and also how it should have pluralism, how it should enjoy autonomy from government, how it should be independent for effective functioning, how this body should be invested with adequate resources and adequate investigative machinery. So these Paris principles are quite critical for the functioning of any national human rights institution, including NHRC, and also for the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Dear students, now let us look at the composition of the NCPCR under the Commission for Protection of Child Rights Act. The Commission consists of one chairperson and 7 members. The chairperson is expected to be a person of great eminence with outstanding work in the issues relating to protection of children. The 6 members are expected to be selected from experts who have great standing, experience, expertise in the fields of child education, child psychology, juvenile justice, child labor, and in laws relating to children, and a number of other areas. In other words, this is expected to be a high-profile commission, and these chairperson and members are nominated by the Government of India. And as far as the functions of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights is concerned, these have been specified in section 13 of the Commission for the Protection of Child Rights Act, and this act entrusts the Commission with a number of statutory responsibilities. In fact, I draw your attention to the graphic which follows as regards the multiple functions which have been assigned to the NCPCR. As you can see, the Commission reviews the safeguards provided by or under any law for the protection of child rights. It presents to central government annually reports relating to these safeguards, inquiry into violation of child rights, examine all factors that inhibit enjoyment of rights of children affected by terrorism, communal violence, riots, natural disaster, domestic violence, HIV/AIDS, trafficking, maltreatment, torture and exploitation, pornography and prostitution, and recommend appropriate remedial measures. In fact, these themes will give you a sufficient idea about the issues concerning child rights violation. In addition, the Commission also looks into matters relating to children in need of special care and protection, including children in distress, marginalized and disadvantaged children, children in conflict with law, juvenile children without family, and children of prisoners, and recommend appropriate remedial measures. The NCPCR also is expected to study treaties and other international instruments and make recommendations, undertake and promote research in the field of child rights, spread child rights literacy, inspect juvenile homes and other such homes where children are kept, and make recommendations. Section 13(1)J is an important provision regarding inquiry into complaints relating to violation of child rights. So, if you look at the Commission is expected to walk on several legs, and it enjoys a wide mandate in terms of its function, encompassing advisory role, reporting, investigative, evaluative, remedial, educational, and supervisory duties in relation to child rights in India. Insofar as inquiry into individual complaints of child rights violation is concerned, the Commission has the powers of a civil court. It can summon any official, it can ask for any public document, it can seek any report, it can examine people on oath, record evidence on affidavits, and in fact, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights assumes different roles under the Commission for Protection of Child Rights, or under the Right to Education Act, or under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. Now let us look at the POCSO Act of 2012. The POCSO Act provides for a monitoring role for the NCPCR. In fact, the Act specifically provides that the Commission shall monitor designation of special courts by various state governments, and also the appointment of public prosecutors in these courts for trying various violations of child rights, and issue of guidelines, training modules, spreading awareness through media, and are calling for individual reports on any specific issue involving violation of child rights, or assess the implementation of the POCSO Act in general and make recommendations. The Act also asks the NCPCR to collect data from various state governments and other authorities on the manner of implementation of the POCSO Act. Let us now turn our attention to the Right of Children for Free and Compulsory Education Act, or what is known as RTE Act. Now, under this act, the Commission has a twin role. One is to monitor the safeguards provided under the RTE Act for the education of children, and secondly, to inquire into individual complaints of violation of the or deprivation of the right to education of children under the RTE Act. If you see the Juvenile Justice Act, it also requires the NCPCR to monitor the implementation of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act, and also visit custodial homes, juvenile homes where children are held for reformation, and to suggest improvement to the conditions therein. In conclusion, we see that a range of safeguards have been provided under the Constitution, specific legislations, regulations and policies for the healthy development and growth of children and for the protection of their rights. And under the Commission for the Protection of Child Rights Act, NCPCR was constituted in 2007 with the commission consists of one chairperson and 7 members. It has been given a range of functions under the section 13(1) of the CPCR Act, and the commission enjoys the powers of a civil code. And you have also seen how the commission assumes different roles under the POCSO Act, or under the RTE Act, or under the JJ Act. Dear students, there is a big gap between the legislative promise as contained in the constitutional safeguards, specific legislative safeguards, and the ground realities. And so this National Commission for Protection of Child Rights is expected to bridge that gap, or expected to see that children enjoy a wonderful environment where they can develop in conditions of freedom and dignity. And in the coming module, we will see a critical evaluation of the working of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Thank you, and see you in the next module.